Welcome back to Ty and some different guys. I am Ty. Wes Chatham is not here. He's off recording a super secret, very exciting project that I'm sure you guys will be hearing about in the next couple of months. But until he gets back, should be back next week. But this week, I have a special guest and a not so special guest. My special guest is CLiton Shorter, the composer for every season of The Expanse and a fabulous human being. And the other guy is Naren Shankar, the cruel taskmaster who beat us when we didn't work hard enough. So here they are.
How I miss those days.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, you can't beat me anymore. I can stand up to you.
Your beating's coming, Ty. It's coming.
Well, thanks, guys. Thanks for agreeing to do this. Sorry, Wes couldn't be here. He honestly is off filming right now on something that I think the fan base is going to be thrilled when they find out. So it'll be very exciting.
Yeah.
In the meantime, let's talk about old shit that nobody cares about anymore. The Expanse.
Yeah, sure. I'm here.
We're like, the joke applies to all of us. It's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the thing that we've been requested, I think, the most when people send in like guest ideas that they want to hear from are obviously Kara-G. And then second to Kara-G is you, CLiton. Everybody's always asking, hey, when are you guys going to have the music guy on?
Yeah.
And I have a bunch of friends who are sort of in the music business who say, hey, I'll start listening to your podcast when you have some music guys on there. So this is an exciting moment for me because one, I can tell all my friends in the music industry, hey, you can listen to my podcast now. CLiton's finally been on. And two, the second best thing to Kara-G has finally been on.
Wow.
So,
that's quite the intro. Thanks.
Yeah.
I hope it's exciting. We'll see here.
It is very exciting. So the other reason we wanted Naren on is because I didn't know this before I started working on a TV show. And for the 7 people who enjoyed behind the scenes stuff, hey, you 7, I didn't realize how closely a showrunner, which Naren was the showrunner on The Expanse for all 6 seasons, how closely a showrunner works with the composer in scoring an episode. And after I started sitting in those sound sessions where, you know, you'd have written your score, we'd have the sound editor was in there, or the music editor was in there, and the two of you would go through and really scene by scene dissect what the score should be doing in that scene. So if you guys want to talk about that process, that would be great.
Well, my plans to just talk about how amazing it is to work with Naren are going to be a little more awkward now because now he already knows this. But
don't mind me. Please do.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. No, it's a process that really varies from director to director and showrunner to showrunner. Sometimes it's a nightmare, and other times it's as good as it is that it has been with Naren. So, you know, it doesn't happen all the time, and it's not always just because somebody's, you know, not good at the job or whatever. It's just sometimes you just don't figure out each other and what they want. And it's my job to figure out the music that Naren has between his ears and doesn't know that he needs. And, you know, it's worked out pretty well for both of us, I think. Naren, I hope.
Yeah, it was such a we had a great time, honestly. I mean, CLiton, maybe you can fill it in too. I can't remember how we actually initially came together on The Expanse. Was there a connection there? Did you know anybody on the show?
I was asked to submit a demo for it, and then I was told I had the job. And then when I talked to all you guys, you said, well, who did you speak to? I don't even know who you, and I go, nobody. I didn't end up interviewing with anybody, which has never happened before. I just got a call to say I had the job. And I think a bunch of people thought they'd all spoken to me, but nobody had. So yeah, it was surprising, but it actually is through Deva Anderson, actually, first season.
Okay, through Deva.
Music Super.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay,
so I met Deva,
right.
and she was at Playtone, and then she said, you know, I'm working on this show that's being shot in Canada. It's called The Expanse. It's a sci-fi series. And I said, well, that sounds cool. And then she told me what the books were and stuff. So I got the books and then, submitted, and there we go.
And Deva was great. She was awesome. I wish she hadn't.
Yeah.
She left, I think, in season 2. Is that right? After season 2.
Yes. Yeah. Unfortunately.
And she was awesome. I have a great anecdote I can tell you if you want, Ty, about when CLiton. I feel like when we meshed for the first time because it's really a strong memory I have, because we were talking about the main title, and we had like a mock-up of the main title, kind of. It was sort of, in process, and Clinton was like, okay, I have an idea, and he did it, and he sent it back, and I kind of synced up Clinton's music to the picture because it hadn't really been done. It was just something he was thinking about. And like the two things so perfectly meshed, and I'm pretty sure that's like where the main title was. I mean, you did like version 1 was our main title for like years.
It was version 1.0. Yeah.
Right.
And that's the thing with you and I and most of the show was just like all the big scenes. I rarely got notes. Like we were in sync. It was the other stuff, where things were up to interpretation, or maybe the coverage wasn't exactly what you wanted, or but the big scenes, it worked out really well. This was an amazing experience.
I do love the idea that we never actually hired you. You just sort of did the Kramer thing from Seinfeld. We just started showing up. So we were like, well, this guy keeps showing up. Let's put him to work.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure that's
it's just like you got the job. And I'm like, what?
No, that was Kramer. That was Kramer. Kramer just started showing up. Remember he started wearing a suit and going to that office, and his briefcase was just full of crackers.
I have to dispute.
Yeah, and the guy's like, it seems like you.
No.
Yeah, that was Kramer.
It's George with the Penske file. He goes into the office. He's not sure he has the job, and he just gets the Penske file, and he stays.
That is also true. The Penske file is also true, but the Kramer one is he just starts showing up.
I don't remember that one.
Yeah, he just starts showing up, and they ask him, and he's like, they're playing the 9 to 5 song.
9 to 5 montage, that's right.
And eventually his boss is like, this report reads like you have no business training at all. I'm afraid I have to let you go. And Kramer's like, you don't even pay me. And the boss is like, that's what makes this so painful.
Yeah.
Okay, now it's ringing a bell. Yes.
Yeah. I like the idea that Clinton just did that. He just showed up, and we were like, well, this guy seems like a composer. Let's let him do it.
There were probably a few times, I would say, where Clinton would take a shot at something, and I was like, no, that's not kind of what I was thinking. But inevitably it would be because I wasn't able to articulate what I wanted. And I think that's a lot of the times the problem with shows is like the ability for a non-musical person such as myself to describe music, because I tend to want to describe drama. And sometimes it's like, or the underlying emotional elements that I feel are at play. And sometimes you can't even tell until you get to the next stage how it's all going to work together with the sound design and everything else, because they kind of operate in different spheres. And I think that when we had differences, that's probably why they occurred.
Well, one thing I did note that I did learn, because, you sit in on the editorial sessions when we're still making the show, and then later you'll wind up sitting in the sound sessions. And the things I learned in the editorial session is that the directors will put in temp music, and they'll put in sort of a temp score, and it's songs that already exist, right? Or it's music from other TV shows or music from other movies. And the idea is it's supposed to convey the emotion of the scene, not like the music should sound like this, but I want this scene to be exciting, so I put in some music from like Gladiator or Mad Max or something that has that exciting thing, and then that becomes sort of like a little bit of a guide on how much that matters to you, Clinton. Do you just like immediately strip all that shit out, or do you actually listen to it?
In particular, to me, the first 4 episodes musically weren't quite as cohesive as later on, and that was part of the reason why, is because there was so many different styles of music going in there. And I seem to remember in one spotting session, if people don't know what spotting session is when we all watch the show together before I started writing. We talk about when and where to have music and compare it to what the temp is, and we talk about what I should do here and there. People have various viewpoints on it. And in the first 4 episodes, there was a lot more voices speaking up than probably there should have been. I remember one person specifically said, wouldn't it be cool to have different music for every single episode? And I thought, oh my God, what have I got myself into here? And then you just dropped the hammer at episode 5, and it was just like, it's my show. And I was like, okay, this is it. It's great. And then it was just, we went off to the race. It was off the races from there on, because we were temping with my music as well as we went along from that point. So we kind of had an idea of where we were going to go. But I was using guitars and stuff, and it was. I
think part of that too is, those first few episodes of any series, the show is trying to find its identity, and that extends to music, right? It extends, it's on the page, it's how you cut it, it's the look of the show, it's the sound design. The music is part of that, and in those very early episodes, you're always kind of searching, right? And I think that we had this idea like the Martians have a theme, and the Belchers have a theme, and this guy has a theme, and everybody has a theme, and it's like, and that's a lot to kind of shove onto the composer, and it can just end up being a dog's breakfast of music, right? And I think that's part of what was happening. And everybody wants to please everybody, and you're all trying to figure out what's the best, approach for the show and the tone that you want to, and the level of score. Clinton and I would talk about, just the insanity of like wall to wall music, on things. And it's like, you don't need it all the time. And sometimes it's so over the top and telegraphs emotion when you can let scenes play in different ways. You have to figure all these things out. It's just a process.
And there'd be some episodes that had 40 minutes of temporary music in it, and other episodes that had 20. So it depended on the editor as well. So you had the editor, the director, and then Naren would do his cut. And it was just, sometimes there's just not as much time that you have in a film and TV anyways. Although we did end up with quite a bit of time on season 1.
We did.
It
was overscored. I mean, it's like, and we asked you, there was too much in it. And again, we're finding our way. But later on, like I can remember the episode from season 5 when Naomi's trapped alone on the ship on the Chetzemoka. There's so little music in that because it's all sound design, and that was Clinton and me talking about. You know what? The sound design is so important in this particular episode that we kind of have to pull back from that. And so, and then incredible, I mean, the last episode of season 6, the finale, there's a ton of music in that episode.
A ton of music. And you left room for it too, and that's the difference. A lot of times, you get directors or showrunners that don't leave room for music, and part of it's because they don't want to feel like they need it as a crutch. There's some sort of ego thing with their writing, and then when they want a big moment of music or they realize they need it, they don't have enough room to fit it in, so it feels rushed. And Naren definitely went with certain sequences with the eye that music is going to carry it here. So as a composer, it's I know how fortunate it is to get in those moments that you can write a piece of music and help just carry the scene because it was designed that way. And I don't get that too often. So it was awesome.
I remember Naren saying that with the sound guys is every now and then he'd be like, we want all the sound here to just go away and we're going to let score carry it. So he definitely kind of had an idea in his mind ahead of time. This scene is just going to be music. All the other sound is just going to drop out.
Well, and he said something, too, that I never heard before from any showrunner director was there was some actors saying lines during a major sequence of I don't remember what it was. I think it was in episode 1 or 2. And the sound guys were trying to carve out the dialogue the whole time. And Naren just goes, those are throwaway lines. Don't even worry about it. No. And I was like, wow. Because you don't, there's no string of the throwaway line most times. And but they are. They're just saying obvious things, close the hatch or do this and that. And you were just like, that doesn't matter. It's the emotion of the moment. It's not exactly to make it clear what they're saying because everybody kind of gets it. It's on the screen. So, yeah.
It's also, you're, again, in those formative episodes, like we were taking the approach of we wanted kind of big sounds in space. We didn't want to do the silent, Kubrick sort of that kind of a deal because we felt like we wanted to convey big, heavy ships, powerful rockets, like, impact hits from weapons and that sort of thing. So we took the approach of the sound design was big and then sometimes the score was big. And sometimes you just can't do both of those things. It's like, and I think that as the show evolved, we made more decisions like that where we said, you know what, this sequence, music is going to take essentially take the role of sound design sort of in it. It was going to convey some of those things. And I also think we got better at delivering sequences to Clinton because in the beginning, it was awful. Like, we would literally have a black slug in the middle of the episode that we sent to Clinton to score, and it was like 35 seconds of music.
Yeah.
It's like, what?
I'm like, there's a ship here and it's coming from there to there, and I'm going, okay.
We'd be describing, he's like,
yeah, sure.
You don't know what to do.
Yeah. And then all of a sudden I ended up with an extra 2 weeks per episode because it was like, we're going to deliver it to you later. So there is more stuff, but it's going to be a limited time with the action scenes because this is, So, no, I took a bit to iron that out too, for sure.
It was kind of messy on the post side initially. Again, just we're trying to figure out how to do the show. I think the gold standard for me when we were starting out was, we talked about the movie Gravity, where they took the approach that you wouldn't ever hear like true sound design in space, but those elements would be scored. They were musical, right? The music would take an explosion. The music would take one giant part of a space station hitting something else. And it's like, and if you felt the sound in a spacesuit as an astronaut, then sound design would come through, but music would take it. I think that's a nice way to look at, scoring a space show. And I think we tried to get more towards that as the show went on.
Yeah, that is a question we get asked a lot is why is there sound in space? That why that decision was made. And I think you just touched on it, but if you could just in very simple language explain to the audience why you elected as the showrunner to have sound in space.
Well, the anecdote that I love telling is apparently, at least apocryphally, from the old 50s movie Journey to the Center of the Earth, where the director had a panic attack. It's the Jules Verne movie, and he goes, "Oh my God, wait, we're inside the Earth. Where's the light coming from?" And he's asking the DPs, like freaked out, "Where's all the light coming from?" And the DPs apparently said, "Same place as the music." It's like,
that's awesome.
It's a great. That's great.
I've never heard that.
It's a great concept to convey. It was a perceptual thing. I think sound design and music are, they're a huge part of your experience of any kind of film or television show. When you just sort of decide to throw one away, you are throwing away half of your senses, right?
Yeah.
And I think that you can take like measures like Battlestar Galactica did, for example, with like in the series, they did sort of like muffled sounds in space, and I never loved that much. I mean, they were trying, and like For All Mankind, they kind of go the Kubrick approach, just music, right? Just music, and you don't really ever hear anything in space, and it's a style. I just wanted something that was a little bit more visceral, and I think you lose it if you don't feel sound.
Yeah, that's the answer I always give to when people ask is, you have, a film or a TV show has two ways to tell you things. It can show you pictures and it can play sounds for you. And that's all it can do. Like your other senses are not involved. And so when you take 50% of that and just get rid of it, suddenly things feel very empty. They feel very cold. Even no matter how exciting the thing you're seeing on screen is, if there's no sound associated with it, it just feels sort of sterile. And I think that's just the lizard brain, right? That the hind brain doesn't take things seriously if there's no sound.
A sound mixer Foley guy that I worked with years and years ago told me this great story. They did a test with two audiences. They showed them one version of the film with like a half-assed, badly mixed soundtrack and score. And then they showed them the exact same film with a perfectly designed, beautifully mixed everything. And people said the second one looked better.
Yeah.
Not sounded better, that it looked better. And that's a really interesting comment on perception. And I think it is a lizard brain appreciation of what your eyes and your ears are getting.
Yeah, it doesn't surprise me that it changed their perception in that way. So you scored The Expanse for 6 seasons. You were the guy. We never had anybody else do any music for us, except that occasionally we would get a song that we would turn into like a future belter version of that song.
Yeah,
I would. Those are the only times we ever had any music that wasn't yours, right?
Correct.
So can you talk a little bit about with those aside, you having done everything else, and I'm actually curious about that. How do you approach as a composer 6 seasons of a TV show? Like what the things that I'm curious about is obviously you talked about the season 1 struggles, getting that figured out, but
sure.
But as you go, obviously you don't want every season to sound exactly like the previous season, right?
Right.
You want the music to sort of evolve, I would guess, and become different, but you want each season to recognizably be the same show.
Well, first you hope it just goes beyond 1 season. And then, and that doesn't happen too often. But then when it does, from what I usually do is just I start adjusting the palette, but it's still based off the original season's motifs, the bed of it. And hopefully, you get better at your craft every year too. So, you start to experiment a bit more with writing, and some things work, some things don't. I think I remember in season 2, I tried adding more analog synths into the score, and Naren shut that down pretty quick.
I didn't like that.
I think I went and spent thousands of dollars. I built that thing right back there. And specifically for him, like Naren, like I built this synth. It's going to be cool, and he's just like, I don't know, really I'm not feeling it. I was like, oh god damn it! But so you try different things. Some things work, some things don't. The motifs, like I said, they get bigger. There's new ones that show up with the new characters, and then you figure out how to combine them. You figure out how to make them larger and how to make them smaller, how to fracture them when a character breaks down, how to combine ones when people team up. There's a lot of that. You just kind of stew on things and go through ideas and then try it out and see what sticks, what doesn't. There's a lot of times you go and score a scene and, day later, you're like, this is horrendous, and you just dump it. You just got to start over again. And when you're, younger doing this, it's harder to throw away stuff because you only hear it one way. And it's just one of those crafts that just does take time. It is an experience thing. It's very few people can just come out of music school and are ready to score films, and they have the music chops, but a lot of things change. Like there's things that get edited and cut, and there's disagreements, and then changes of musical approach. And, so you have to get really good at starting over and trying things. And, it's just, it just evolves over time. And you love to believe it's all, there's one arc for the season. There's an arc for a scene. There's an arc for an episode. There's an arc for the entire series. And, I think it works to varying degrees, but you just try to build that. And, I'm happy with how it all turned out.
Can I tell a story about the difference between source and score? It's probably my favorite from the run of the show, because we did a little bit of both. Like even like in the pilot, we did like a belter version of a Black Keys song, and there were times that we would create things like one of my favorites, the Highway Star, the belter version of Highway Star,
awesome.
Right, with Mineo, that I loved, and even the I forget the I'm So Lonely, the belter version.
When he lost his girl.
Exactly.
There's
some funny bits in there, and that's on the music supervisor side. They find those cuts, or we make them. But it's always a choice, right? And depending on the show, they work better with like what are traditionally been called needle drops, right, in the middle of an episode. And we did an episode in season 4 where the end of it was this big tidal wave was coming like from and there had been a choice made early on to use a song, and it was like, it's like, I don't want to be a hero. It was like something horrible. It was just awful, like some direct on the nose, terrible lyrics. And we tried over and over again, and we did a belter version, and the music supervisor, like, they really wanted to believe it. It was great. And I think we finally got to like very far down the process, and then might have been when you and I were sitting there, CLiton, in the score, and I was just going, this is fucking horrible.
Horrible. I know. And you gave me, I think I got 2 days notice to do this huge sequence at the end of the show. And he said, can you write something? I'm like, okay. I'll tell the wife I'm not coming to bed for a couple of days. But yeah.
The funniest thing though I said, this is just, I hate this. This is horrible. And literally everybody in the post team said, thank God, Naren, we thought you all liked it. I go, no, I didn't like it. It's terrible. It's terrible.
It was Ty. Ty said, Ty goes,
Ty did that
God,
in the mix.
At the mix
in front. He goes, thank God we got rid of that piece of shit song. He said to the
I know. And the team was in the room. I was going, oh my God! I felt, it was, it was cold blooded. I mean, it needed to be done.
It needed to be done, but it goes to tell you, it's like these are these choices are somewhat important because, like, I actually do remember sitting down there going, like, if I look at this in 1 year and hear this, I'm just going to want to crawl under a fucking rock. I would be so angry with myself.
Well, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I mean, that was where the director of the episode took a bit of artistic license because it wasn't written that way. And he did the whole thing at the end and put it in slow-mo and put in this song. And all of a sudden it was like we had like a network series ending to a show. And it was just, he was trying
something different. I think ultimately the fault was mine because I let it go way down the road. I was trying to say, like, okay, let me see if I can make this work. And went through, it was like the song didn't work. Then we did a belter version of it. I go, maybe that's the thing. And it's like, no, then it just got somehow worse. And then it's like, no, it's got to be more like less of a ballad. It's got to be more rocky. It's like, oh, every choice just made it worse.
I know.
Finally,
it was tough.
Quentin, fix this, please. I beg you.
Yeah, I know. And then we're at the mix and playing it back, and all of a sudden those guys hear my piece of music there, and just
they were surprised because they didn't know it really was.
And then Ty really just drops the bomb in the room.
I didn't know. I didn't know those guys were in the room.
I know you didn't. I know it was not intentional. But, oh my God,
it was awesome.
But you know what? Their music was bad, and they should feel bad.
It was.
That's right.
It was.
That's
terrible.
exactly right.
It's unfortunate.
It had to be said. It had to be said.
It was like Belter Arena Rock or something with it. It was like it was like going to be lighters, and it was.
It was just awful. Just awful.
Hey, and you know,
maybe that's why the last two seasons score didn't come out.
I'm sure that
I don't know.
I'm personally responsible for that because I made them mad.
I'm blaming you.
Yeah.
But the reality is, I mean, Naren would be the first to admit this as well. It's not just them. We all have that moment. We all deliver a script where afterwards we're just like, Jesus, what was I thinking?
Yeah.
You know, or a scene, or directors direct shots where like you're watching it in the edit and you're going, what was this director thinking? You know, so it's not just music guys; it's everybody. So not to pile on those guys.
Yeah,
we have all face planted like that.
I delivered an opening to a movie, and we were sitting there at the dub stage, and we watched it down, and I'm hearing this opening piece of music, and I'm just like wanting to throw up, and I just, guys, I got to leave. There's no way. I can't. That's just, it's awful. We have to start over again. They're just, the director goes, thank God, brother. I was not digging it either. I'm like, okay, good, great. We're on the same page. I will go and fix it. Yeah, it happens. Yeah. Of course. Because you get lost in the moment. And I think with them, they probably had so many different notes of how to change it and make it more rock and roll and this and that. And you just are unable to take a step back and just go, this is awful. And sometimes,
I think they believed in it more than we did.
It's entirely possible. I don't know.
Well, I wasn't going to bring that story up, but since Naren did, I want to. I
can't get into trouble now.
Exactly. No. What are they going to do? Fire me? I do want to talk about. I want to respect your time, though. I do want to talk a little bit about your process. And what I'm seeing there is I'm seeing a piano and 2 video screens right above it.
Yeah.
So, is the beginning of scoring for you? Do you actually sit and watch the scenes and tinker on the piano and try to find a theme, or did you feel it out in that way, or do you watch the scene and then go back and write? Because I've seen the reason I ask is because I've seen. Remember when Miami Vice was on in the 80s? Who was that? The composer did a very famous composer did
Hammer.
The music. Yeah, that's right. And I remember watching it on one of those like news programs. They showed him composing. He's actually watching the episode of Miami Vice, and he's just sitting there playing on his piano as he watches.
Yeah,
and I was like,
jamming for sure. Yeah.
He's just jamming, right? I'm like, is that how composers do it?
He's a player, though, right? So, like, he's an improvising musician. Do you know what I mean? Like, one of my, I mean, he played on Jeff Beck's Lead Boots album. I don't know if you guys ever heard that. I mean, it's just incredible. And, he's an amazing keyboardist, but, he's not I don't know how much he's scoring scenes and stuff like that. So the process is quite a bit different. Like some people are good at writing speeches and some people are good at giving speeches, and some people can do both, but it's not too often. And I write speeches and I spend time tinkering, so I will usually watch the scene first, and then if it depends on the scene, right? If it's a huge action sequence, I quite often start with percussion. And I start mapping it all out and have all my hit points and go and put markers down and tempo changes and everything, get it all to a place where I'm comfortable. And then I start thinking about motors and motifs. Where can I fit them in this and that? But then if it's an emotional one, yeah, sometimes, the real emotional moments, I just don't use a click track. I just play over top of it and be done with it. And then, if the cue has to be, reworked later in the season, it's always a pain in the ass because I didn't land anything on tempo markers or bars and beats. But, it really does depend on the scene. So, and if it's a motif or a theme I'm coming up with, yeah, I'm a guitar player, but I fake it on piano because it's way easier to input into the computer. And, I usually sit down on the piano and come up with themes that way and then figure out different ways to do variations. And, yeah.
One thing I noticed when we were in the editing sessions is how many different layers of stuff are in the score that you've given. You'd have this big dramatic score going, and then, Naren would be like, hey, can we pull out that bass part because it's interfering with this sound effect, or can we pull? Yeah. And there's like so many layers of stuff that you've put together for us.
I did that very rarely because very rare, because that's actually an important thing that we would talk about. That is that a lot of times in the business, the sound guys are just sort of trained and they're given license to like pull shit out of the score if it's messing with their sound design. And I don't like doing that because that just messes up the music. And we would talk about this. We'd have this problem all the time. So like, guys, I want the score flat. And by that, I meant stop fucking around with the internal levels of Clinton's
you move the fader en
instrumentation.
masse. Do not go and push this and that or mute this and that. Because I've had mixers do that, and it
drives me crazy. Yeah.
Well, and this is the thing, this is new. So what you're seeing there, those are called stems. So I deliver stems. So I deliver a brass track separate from the strings and the percussion, this and that, so that if you do run into issues, you can go and deal with it individually. And it's usually me, the music editor, that would go and do that on the dub stage to try and fix something. And if it doesn't work, then I whip home to the studio and rework the cue with MIDI instead of audio and then redeliver. So they're only supposed to be kind of for emergency purposes. Now, when if you're cutting an episode, sure, it doesn't matter if you go and just use a couple of stems here and there. If you didn't want a percussion part, you just want to use the strings. Yeah, that makes sense. But it's different from in the editing suite from the dub stage.
Yeah, and the editing suite it's just a guide track. And I think, Ty, if you remember the many hours we spent on on the mix stage, it's like when that would happen, I would always go talk to Clinton. Or the music editor, right? I'd say listen, can you guys rework this? I think it's interfering with some of the sound design, or we didn't expect it to sound like this or something else. It would never be to just pull out the percussion or pull out this, or it was never done that way. It just kind of ruins the music, and it's not the way I like to work.
Well, and all those things are there for a reason to balance the piece of music. And when you take one out, all of a sudden it doesn't make any sense. I worked on another series where the post-producer spent a great deal of time muting stems and removing things. And I would deliver score, and all of a sudden I'm watching the episode on TV, and all of a sudden it's a solo piano cue. And I'm like, what happened here? He's like, oh man, it worked great. I'm going, okay, that's just not cool. Like, you did, if you wanted that, no problem. Let me know beforehand. So, some people obey the rules of good etiquette more so than others.
But I think it's even, to me, it's a lot more than just etiquette, because it is a respect for what the music brings to the process. I mean, like, think of how long we talked about the ending of episode 205, Miller and Julie Mao, the episode Home, with all the strings. I mean, and that it was like we had built up to that moment for like a season and a half. It's a gigantic character moment, a big, turning point in the larger narrative. And that was Clinton was like, no, we need to actually score this with a string quartet. He went and did it. He wasn't even happy the first time, so he went back and did it a second time because he felt there was more. It was like, tell that story.
Yeah,
that was really
good. Yeah, so, it was decided pretty quick that it just should be a quartet. And I'm going, okay, well, look, if we're going to do this right, I want to do it in London. So we did it at Air Studios in London and mixed and recorded by Jeff Foster, who's like the guy over there. And I'd done other films with him. And it was done in room 1, which is Coldplay's room. They take over that room for like a year in order to do an album. And it's a great sounding room, but the place you really want to be is the hall. And it's an old church. And I think the story is Mick Jagger's dad was like the pastor there or something. Like it's crazy. The stories are, fantastic over there. So anyways, I did it in Studio One and it sounded great. And then I watch it and I've sent it to Rain. He's happy. And I'm going, oh my God, I did this in the wrong register. It was just too high how to explain all in terms. Too high of pitch for me. It was the register was too high and I wanted it lower to just be deeper and just have more gravity to it. So I just said, I'm going to spend my own money. I got to get this done right because I don't want to live with it with the scene. It's too big of a scene to do. So thankfully, everybody at Air was really appreciative and understood the situation. Said, okay, if it's your own money, well, let's use the big room. And so we got into the hall and the string sound totally opens up. It's so much better. I still have the original. It's nice, but it's a much tighter, smaller sounding quartet. So yeah, that was, it would be great to be able to do a whole series with that budget in mind. It'd be great. But it adds up and it's always there. And there was a lot of money, obviously, with visual effects in this show for good reason. Looked incredible. Yeah. I still think it looks better than most movies I watch.
That was awesome. I will never forget that. Clint was like, he's like, I'm paying for it myself. I'm like, dude, really?
I had to. I couldn't live with it like that. It was like, no, yeah.
And it is to this day one of the pieces of music on the show that people talk about as the best music on the show. So it was not wasted effort. I was going to bring up another one that people bring up a lot as some of the best music on the show. It's I believe it's in season 2 where the first time Bobby sees the ocean.
Oh yeah.
She comes out of that tunnel and then the ocean is there.
Beautifully shot. That was just
210.
Awesome. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, the score sequence, though, people bring up that score a lot, that is one of their favorite pieces of music in the show.
Yeah, no, that was an incredible sequence to score. It just kind of came together, same kind of thing. It just felt right, and I think I teased it earlier when she was walking around.
Yeah.
And then really brought it together. And that whole sequence. And then afterwards,
I think that one, Clinton, was actually planned in the sense because we knew our season really well, right? Season 2 opened up with Bobby on Mars, looking out at what she wanted Mars to become with the ocean. Yeah. And so we talked about building to that moment in episode 10 when she finally comes to Earth and defects and does it and she goes to the ocean. And so there was a whole thing with Bobby that was the payoff. And I think it works in your mind a little bit. I think that's part of it because you feel like, and that's the nice part about talking to the composer about where the show's going dramatically, because it allows you to build these ideas musically into it, and then that payoff is going to just feel that much more satisfying.
Yeah, no, it was an awesome sequence. And I think actually talking about it, I remember too, originally when she was walking down through the tunnel, the sound designers had a whole bunch of water splashing and her feet plumping around. And
you and I was like, just sort of like, get that shit out of here.
This is not what we're going to remember. Wait till we get up to the water. We can hear the waves coming in, and that's what's drawing her to it. That was a good time for us to, vary back and forth.
That is a thing that I did learn working on the show, and Naren is always very cognizant of, is there are hundreds of people who make a TV show, and every one of them is entirely focused on the thing that they do. Yeah. And so, the sound guys, the thing that they do is they put Foley in. They put in splashing sounds when people walk. So, they're not looking at the larger emotional, thing of the scene. They're looking at, like, she's walking through water. There should be splashes there. Right. Yeah. And everybody's doing that. And the job of the showrunner became clear to me, the more time I spent on the show, the job of the showrunner is to sort of kind of pull everybody back a little bit. Okay, I see you rushing toward that thing that you do, but that we don't need that quite that much here. So let me pull you back a little bit. So just kind of putting the brakes on all these people who are rushing for the one thing that they do.
You do have to do that because you're essentially, it's almost like an editorial position in the sense like you have to decide what to emphasize. Right? Yeah. You have to decide what the tone is that you're trying to convey. And I think part of the reason that most shows sound so bad when they actually air, and by the way, that is true of most shows, because they just don't take the time in the back end to really think about these things. They tend to just be a mush. Like you can't hear the dialogue, the music is muddled by the sound design, and it's just a bunch of stuff, right? Because you do make a choice when you say, you know what? It doesn't matter that she's sloshing through water. Music takes this moment emotionally, right? Sometimes pure sound design takes the moment emotionally. Yeah. Right? And you have to make that decision. So that's that part of the process, which is why it's important to spend the time to do it right.
I mean, famously,
some directors and showrunners are not very good at it. And I've worked with ones that aren't. You know, a key emotional moment, everything's happening, and then they're bringing in this, I can't remember what it was, some kit when the woman was dying or whatever, and then the sound effects guys had like such loud sounds and the latches, whoosh, you know, and they'd put reverb on it to try and add to the moment. It was just like, and the producers like, wow, this is so great. And I'm still going, oh my God, don't do this, please. And nope, they stayed.
Most writers, the mistake that they make is they want to hear every line of dialogue. Yeah, well, it's like the only thing that's important to them.
Goes back to the throwaway line. So I was saying the throwaway. When you said this, it's a throwaway line. I was going, oh my God, never heard this before. Incredible.
I think famously, you know, you're talking about sometimes sound design takes the emotion of the scene. In season 5, I believe it's episode 8, where Naomi's trapped on the ship, and we end with no score, just the sound of her banging on that pipe with her wrench. Awesome. As she's trying to break that pipe free. Like, that's it. It's just a banging sound, but all of the emotion of everything that's happening is in that sort of banging. It seems like it, you know, in every aspect of the show, but especially here we're talking about sound design today, is figuring out which thing matters in the scene and focusing on that and pulling everybody back. Because if you don't, everybody's just going to run full speed at the thing that they know how to do.
Yeah, and so that's in particular, Naren knew right away. I mean, you told me, it's Dory, there's no score here. It's going to be her clanking this thing. It wasn't even like, you know, why don't we try having a bit of music in the background and everything else? We'll see how it goes. It's like, nope, that's what we're doing. Cool, great. Like, crystal clear, knows what he wants.
Yeah,
well, I mean, and then you get the weekend off because you don't have to write any score for that.
Yeah, that's right.
It's nice.
Yeah.
But then there's a sequence in like I think it's 408. It's over Illis. They're making they're hooking the Rocinante to tow the other ship. It's like 8 minutes of music. It's like this really long piece of music that's for that whole big sequence at the end.
That might have been my favorite sequence to score.
I love that piece. I love that piece, too. And,
it was just there's lots of stuff to it.
It's so long. And we would do back and forth with notes, and I would send him detailed notes where we would talk them through. And it was like that piece, like I had like no notes on it, like at all. And Clint was like, thank God.
It's just like, if you didn't like that, I don't know what you're gonna like, because man, I spent a lot of time on that. But I got so into it though, because there were so many parts to hit.
Well, and everything builds, and it's like, and they combine. It's a really beautiful piece of music, and I think we ended up temping with that a zillion times because it was just it just had great escalation in it, and it starts out small, just grows and grows and grows and grows and grows, and it's like really, that was fun.
Great sequence.
Yeah, I know the joy that comes from turning something into Naren and not getting any notes. It doesn't happen very often. It doesn't happen very often, but when it does happen, you feel like you just slam dunked.
Oh yeah, no. I got lots of notes on some episodes for sure. I just was on the bigger sequences. It was pretty good, but there was some episodes.
Well, it was I would say detailed notes. They weren't you know. I mean,
there was no like this is horrendous. You know, it was just like I'm rethinking what we want the viewer, where we want the viewer here. I'm like, okay, that's cool. You know, that's
what we actually talked totally a lot about. I realized is we would talk about outs a lot. We were like when to come out, how hard to come out, where to leave gaps. It was like there were times. Like, you know what was interesting? The one that went through a bunch of changes when Naomi jumps from one ship to the other, that was a tricky one.
Yes.
That was a really tricky one, right? And I think because you had scored the jump for a while, and I felt like
I'd scored the whole thing right up to her getting right up to it.
Right.
And then you just chopped it. It's vicious. Yeah.
But there was a reason. It was like the music took her to the precipice, and it was like...
It was the right call, for sure, but I'd spent so much time on it.
I know. But it was like... But that was the fun of the collaboration, right? It was like we were... And it was always like... And I think when we got to the end of it, we were both really happy with where it went, because you got to keep the emotion of losing her friend and everything, but we also had the hard, abrupt jump into nothing, into the vacuum of space where just sound design took it, and it made her feel more isolated and alone at the end. I mean, but that was that was a really tricky bit of score, because there's so much going on in the lead up and the jump and everything else, and the depth of sin, and I mean, it was really. That was a good.
There's still a great version out there where it's scored all the way to the end too.
Hey, can we get that score? Joseph could put it in the episode.
What season was that?
Season 5.
Season 5.
Yeah.
That's 5.
Well, the album was ready to go, and it was the extended version on the album.
Womp womp womp.
Well, if you have that music, send it to Joseph. He can put it in. We can play it.
Okay. Yeah. Sure.
But I'm willing to bet, Cilinton, you never got Naren's harshest crit. You know how in Mortal Kombat there's fatalities and then there's brutalities?
Right.
Where it's the fatality that's so bad they call it a brutality. Naren has the brutality crit. I bet you never got it. I bet Naren never said to you, Clint, did you think this was good?
No. The harshest critique I got from him, was season 1. And I did this. I pulsed in a couple of chords with strings to see how he would like it. And you said, "What's that right there?" I'm like, "Yeah, those are chords with strings that are kind of pulsing in." And he goes, "Yeah, don't do that again." I was like, "Oh, fair enough note. It's a good note. Yeah, got it."
Oh my god,
that was the harshest I got. That was the worst I ever got from Naren.
He did not hit you with the Cilinton. Did you think that was good?
No, I did. I never got that. Thankfully.
Yeah.
That was by the way, that's out of context, because when I asked that question, I was genuinely concerned as if. Yeah, well, we don't have to get into that. I don't remember what those pulsed strings were. Why didn't I like them? What was the problem?
You just didn't like how they came. I don't know. It really jarred you, and it's like I've used them a lot over my career. It's actually something. What's the composer?
Now you're second guessing your whole career.
Yeah, no. Harry Gregson Williams. He uses them all the time, and it was something of his that I liked, and I used it a couple times here and there. And it just did not make it past that one episode. And it never made the episode, of course. But yeah,
part of what makes what Clinton was talking about earlier, that sort of that crazy half a dozen voices and trying to please everybody. I think it's part of the reason that good collaborations essentially evolved to being like the showrunner and the composer, because it's so subjective, right? Music is so subjective, and it's whenever you try to do it by committee, it is a disaster. It's just and it puts the composer in an impossible situation. And it's
I've done 2 shows with it like that, and it always ends up being a mess. I did a show where I'd have to deliver my score to the editor of the episode, the writer of the episode, the supervisor, all the producers, and sometimes an actor if they had a major part of the thing. The post super would then send me back notes from everybody. I'm going,
oh wow,
I'm not working like this. You can't do this. You're going to have to put the notes together yourself, or you're going to have to get what's his name, and he's going to have to just say this is what is important and what is not. But that particular showrunner was unavailable most times, and the show reflected that. And I've had other ones where studios step in and all of a sudden they're contradicting what the supposed showrunner wants, and the person clearly wasn't a showrunner. But in my career, those have been, much more rare than the other ones. Usually it is, you get to work with somebody that understands what they want, like Naren, and can sell it to a group of people and just say, you're going to have to trust me here. Like, I know what I'm doing, and I got a vision for the show, and this is why you hired me.
Yeah.
And we got there, thankfully, with this, and it shows, I think, in the series.
All right. Well, before we head toward the wrap up, I did want to ask, because I think this is a thing people are curious about. How did you wind up a guy who scores TV shows and movies? Like, did you come out of music school? And
I did. Yeah, I dropped out of college. I had like an experimental rock trio.
Oh my God.
Which was now today would be called prog rock.
You're my hero, man. Dropped out of college to play in a prog rock trio?
Yeah.
Fuck yeah.
I was in music college. No, but I was really thinking I was doing something special, you know. Like, why do I want to learn piano? I'm not going to play piano. I'm just playing guitar, man. I spend most of my days playing piano now, so I really wish I hadn't dropped out. So I had this experimental rock trio, and, you know, I never, ever like connected with lyrics. I'd be the person that would have no idea what the words were. You know, like I had friends that would get the album. The first thing they do is start reading the words. Oh my God, it's incredible. It's what they're saying. I'm like, I can remember the melody and everything else, but words never worked for me. And so with this rock trio, it was usually revolving around a guitar solo and a bass solo and a drum solo. And, you know, we tried getting a vocalist in and stuff, and they're always just like going, there's no room for me, man. I'm like going, okay, sorry. I don't know what to say. And it was really kind of getting boring after a while. And we used to go up to my family's cabin, and we go up there and basically just drink and jam the whole weekend. And I had a buddy of mine that came up, and at night he put on this score to Never Cry Wolf by Mark Isham. And up to this point, I'd really only heard orchestral scores, and, you know, I appreciated them. You know, I was a kid, grew up loving Star Wars, the whole thing. And that score was mostly synth based. And I just couldn't believe what I was listening to, because I thought, oh my God, this guy is not writing in form. He's writing whatever he wants. I didn't realize the film was dictating the form, but right. I was so against and hated writing songs that I had to go and follow these set rules. You know, I grew up listening to Pink Floyd and stuff, you know, like my dad got The Wall at Christmas and we listened to it for days, you know. So that's more what I was connecting to. And so when I heard this film score, I was like, oh my God. So I immediately just said, you know, okay, guys, I know what I want to do now. I went and got like an Atari 1040 STE and got, I can't remember if it was Cakewalk or Cubase or something on there. Got a synth, got a Roland. And then I just went from there. And I was working at a music store. And then I went to this school called CDIS, Center for Digital Imaging and Sound, just to make sure I knew what I was doing with synths and computers, and did. And then I got a job assisting a guy in Vancouver who was the busiest guy in town. And I totally faked it when I went in there that day. He said, I mostly work with samplers. You've worked with samplers before. And I'm like, oh yeah, of course. Sure. For sure. I'd never used a sampler before. Never. But I knew I could figure out synths and gear. And so back then, when you'd load a sample, and I'd load his Miroslav Vitas libraries with these really expensive, like $3,000 for a string library back then, which was bananas. And as you were loading the sounds, there were these high pitches that would go, bah, 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 boop, 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 as I was loading in there. And I go, what is that sound? And he goes, what do you mean? I go, that sound I'm hearing. He goes, that's the sound all samplers make when they're loading. And I'm like, oh, no, there's another thing I'm hearing here. I totally, almost blew it completely. I told him that story like 2 years later, and he goes, you son of a bitch. He goes, and I'm like, I had no idea. But so yeah, I learned everything working for that guy. We had like 5 series going at once, and he was doing all the writing. I mean, a lot of people thought, I was doing a lot of the writing. No, I was learning so much from him. And he'd get shows where showrunners would trust him, and they wouldn't even bother temping them. And they would just say, do the show. Terry would say, hey, can you just go and do a cue sheet for me and figure out when and where we should have music? And then I'll let you know what I think of what you thought where there should be music. And I was like, oh, wow. And I mean, like, oh my God, it's incredible. So the great part was that I would watch it down, figure out where there should be music. And then him and I would sit down and go through it. And he'd tell me where he thought I was wrong and where I thought I was right. But the big thing for me was the scenes where they wanted music, but nothing was really happening, which was generally just a really bad sequence, because this was not great television. Like, it was just awful. And they really needed it filled up. And I would always sit there and go, what on earth is he going to do here? Because I'd have no idea what to write. Because, obviously I'd be thinking, okay, if it's an emotional scene or it's a dangerous scene, the music's obvious. But for any of these other moments, and then it was just like, oh, wow, he's just doing stuff with fifths and fourths and staying away from major and minor, it was to figure it out, because then I could go to his keyboard and see exactly what he did. So anyways, that's how I got into it, and it just went from there.
So when we first brought you onto the show, I remember being very excited because you had scored District 9.
Yeah.
And I loved that movie. I still think it's the best movie that director has ever made. It's I think a great movie. How did you get the job scoring that movie?
So I had worked with, well, actually, I went that CDIS, that school I went to. There was another guy there named Trevor Kaywood, and he was a visual effects guy. And he got a job at this studio, and he called me up and said, you have to meet this kid, Neil. The guy is going to be a superstar. He's got a great look and all that stuff, and he loves score and the whole thing. So I went and met him, and then I scored a couple of like commercials with him. And then I scored his shorts. Now, it wasn't scored. I wrote some tracks for it, which was called Alive in Joburg, which ended up being District 9.
Yeah.
So what happened was he was hired to do Halo, and he'd worked on it for like a year. And then Sony, I believe, thought Peter Jackson was going to direct it. And Peter said, nope, Neil's going to do it. And then Sony said, nope. So it got thrown out. And Neil was just like beside himself. And he's like, I'm done with this business. I don't want anything to do with it. And then that's when Peter said, look, why don't you go and think of a full feature-length version of Alive in Joburg and see if we can get the money to make it. And they did. And then I think he asked Steve Jablonski to score it. And I think Jablonski wanted the entire budget for one cue. So then he called me. And then he called me and said, you want to do this? And I'm like, well, yeah, of course. And then, so yeah. And yeah, I mean, the first version I saw of it was, I mean, you talk about the black slugs, it was just filled with them. But even with all of that, I just said, oh my God, you guys, this movie is going to be awesome. You can just tell it was great. And yeah, so that's how I got it. He was in Vancouver.
Okay, I didn't know that you had already been working with him before that. That's cool.
Yeah, and the funny thing is, Charlton, the lead actor in it, had never acted before. Charlton was a visual effects producer and had a company in South Africa, and I'd scored stuff for Charlton. I did a commercial for him for some stereo system company. And I used to laugh and make fun of his VO because he'd have to go and do things and stuff. And I would just like because I was saying, because he was really funny. Yeah. And, but the story goes that they did like a treatment, like a 10-minute thing to try to get funding. And he just used Charlton because he said, dude, I need somebody to go and do this. And you want to do it? Charlton's like, yeah, let's do it. And then he gets and does this whole thing. And the story goes that Peter said to Neil, he goes, I can get you your budget, but if I do, Charlton has to be the lead in the movie. He is it. And Neil's just like, what? He's never acted before. What are you talking about? He's going to freak out. He's just like, I don't know. You got to get him. And yeah, rest is history.
Great.
Yeah,
he was right. He was right.
He was totally right. Yeah. Peter was right throughout the whole process.
That's great.
All right. So one of the things that we always do on this show is we'll have a top 5.
Right.
And try to do it on theme. So the one we were talking about is doing a top 5 movie scores. And the reason I thought this would be appropriate for obviously for you, Clinton, because you have scored movies, but I have spent many hours at Naren's house, writing and hanging out and doing, writing work on his back patio. And the music he listens to on his very expensive in-home sound system is movie scores. So there's always movie scores playing in the background while we're sitting there writing. So I figure Naren will probably have some strong opinions on movie scores as well. So this is the list that is this a fan list, Joseph?
No, I didn't have a chance to have the fans come up with this. They were doing the TV intros.
Gotcha.
Before we decided to go with the best movie scores.
Yeah. Okay. So you don't have to go off of this list. But just, do you have your top 5 movie scores?
I did prepare something here, but it's more than 5. I couldn't narrow it down. But yeah,
well, we can help you narrow it down to 5. And by the way, this is very important. This actually goes into, whenever we do a top 5 on the show, it goes into the Library of Congress as the official top 5 for that category from then on.
Fair enough.
So,
all right, so I better make sure I get this straight.
No pressure. So we don't have to pick from the list, although there's a couple of good ones on that list already, I can see.
Yeah.
So what is your list, Clinton? I'm curious.
Well, Jerry Goldsmith's Planet of the Apes. I think that is a big one for me. Me and my buddies, we used to go to their house and we'd play Risk, and we'd have that in the background. It was very dramatic, rolling the dice. Blade Runner.
Oh, yeah. Well, you're talking the classic Vangelis score, right?
Yes. Yeah. American Beauty. That was a huge one for me. Thomas Newman's probably my biggest influence for sure. I mean, he changed film scoring and particularly commercials for like 4 years after that. Every commercial sounded like American Beauty.
That's like, there's so many movies of his that are phenomenal. He's amazing.
Yeah, like Shawshank's on there too.
Shawshank, Road to Perdition.
I had The Thing as an option. Yeah. Thin Red Line's another great one.
Thin Red Line's fantastic.
Obviously Star Wars. I really like Solaris.
The original or the Clooney?
The Clooney.
Yeah.
Clooney one. Yeah. I had like Eternal Sunshine on there too. So that's pretty much it. So that's too many. So, that was kind of my list there.
Well, I think your list is missing Raiders of the Lost Ark, which I think is one of the greatest film scores of all time.
That was the one on the list that I would pick, actually. Should I throw a few in here for the mix?
Yeah, go ahead, man.
Gladiator, I think, is phenomenal.
Gladiator is an amazing soundtrack. Yeah,
it's really beautiful. I am a fan of the Robert Downey Jr. Sherlock Holmes. Again, another Hans Zimmer in there.
I know why that sounds different from most other of his scores too.
Oh, really?
That has to do with Jeff Foster, the mixer that we used for the quartet. Hans was so busy, his regular mixer wasn't available, so Jeff mixed it, and Hans comes in and listens to it and says, "What is going on here? This doesn't sound like my scores." And Jeff said, "Well, you asked me to mix it." And this is so Jeff. Jeff's just like, "This is what I heard, so this is it." And he's like, "You're supposed to make it sound like the temporary mix that I've been." Jeff was like, "Nope." So, Jeff was a big part of why that sounds the way it is. Yeah.
That's good.
So in the same way that Naren does his death crit of "Did you think this was good?"
Yes.
one of our writers
got given that. Yeah.
Well, one of our writers, Dan Nowak, his rebuttal to criticism was, "I don't like that way you did this, and I want you to change it." Dan would reply with, "Oh, I thought we wanted it to be good." Your music editor there, it sounds like that was what he was doing. Like, it's supposed to sound like my thing. Well, I thought we wanted it to be good, though.
Basically, yeah, that would be Jeff to a T.
I would throw a couple other ones in here too that I think are really wonderful. It's a sort of a mix of source and score, but Slumdog Millionaire and 127 Days, the A.R. Rahman stuff I thought was amazing.
Yeah, very cool.
So there's two different kinds of things you can go for here, and I think we should clarify. So there are iconic scores, like scores that like you hear it and it's like it's so closely tied with that movie, and it's like the second you hear it, you know exactly what movie it is. Yeah. Things like, I think Godfather falls into that.
Sure.
That is like so Godfather, right?
Jurassic Park. I mean, there's lots that are like that.
Exactly.
Jurassic Park, absolutely.
Yes, yeah. But I'm talking about ones that basically I wore out, like ones that I played over and over again. That's what I tried to stick it to.
So sure. I think that's the two categories here. So there's the iconic ones, but then there's the ones that, like, if it's playing, you're going to listen to the whole thing.
Yeah.
Right. It's the music of it. And I think it sounds like your list was more on that side.
Yes, it
less
was,
on the iconic side and more on the this is just beautiful music
because otherwise,
side.
we're going down the Bernard Herrmann thing too.
Yeah,
and it's like, Psycho? Of course, how could you not have Psycho on the list? I mean, there's that's separate for me.
Yeah. So I think Joseph, I would take Raiders of the Lost Ark is iconic, but I don't know that I would just sit and listen to it for fun. The Thing is iconic, but I don't know if I would just sit and listen to it for fun. Gladiator, I think. Like, I have listened to the soundtrack of Gladiator. It's just a beautiful soundtrack.
It's beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. I think Star Wars, like, it's incredibly iconic, but I don't know if I would just sit and listen to it for fun.
No.
So we can start to clear some of this stuff off of here.
Thin Red Line, I absolutely have listened to for fun.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's one I've worn out. American Beauty worn out. Blade Runner worn out. Planet of the Apes worn out. Solaris. Yeah.
All right. So if you were forced to pick your 5, what are you going to land on?
My 5 are definitely Planet of the Apes and Blade Runner, definitely American Beauty, and definitely Thin Red Line, and then it's just the last one. I gotta go. I have to go Shawshank. If I don't have 2 from Thomas Newman on the list, I'm denying myself my history.
Shawshank is a beautiful score.
It is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. He was just
and it is unusual in that it is both things. It is both iconic and beautiful. I mean, because as soon as I hear any piece of the Shawshank score, I know exactly where I'm at. I know which movie I'm at. At the same time, though, it is a beautiful piece of music you can just sit and listen to. Yeah. Well, there you have it. There's the official top 5 music scores.
Before we go, I do have a couple quick questions from the patrons since they've been wanting you for so long. Okay. I just wanted to ask these.
Let's do it.
As far as which composer or piece of music affects you the most emotionally?
Thomas Newman.
There we go.
Yep.
When scoring for the show, did you experiment with a variety of different instruments to see which ones would fit? You kind of did touch on this where it was going all over the place, but...
Yeah, like there's an instrument behind me here that's this South American instrument called a quattro, and I bowed that, and I used that on the Well Wallet cue. Mm-hmm. When the pod was going down and we were running through there in episode 1, the whatever it is, those pods, those things that were going
transit
through
pods,
transit pods.
In series,
that was me bowing that, and like I said, I experimented a bit, but it was mostly just with synths and stuff in the end, to make sure it didn't sound too synthetic for Naren there. But it was mostly building synth sounds and stuff and using strings.
You used for belters a lot, didn't you, over the years? Because we kept coming back.
Well, there was the circle bells too, which are over there, and that they're just like these kind of long tubular things, and hit them with a rubber mallet, and that's what I do for the belters.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And then your compositions are like jazz, unpredictable and open-ended. When you are not composing, what are you listening to that inspires you or inspires your approach to composition?
I spent a lot of time listening to 50s and 60s jazz trios, so it's funny to hear that. At one point, I was taking jazz piano, and the guy I was working for, that Terry guy in Vancouver, pulls me aside because I was leaving early to go to my piano lesson. He goes, I got to ask you, do you want to be a jazz piano player or do you want to be a composer? And I went, all right. So I pulled back on the jazz trio thing in the end, because ultimately I was better at writing than I was at improvising anyhow, like when I was talking about Jan Hammer there, which, by the way, would have made my top 5 TV themes, the Miami Vice theme. But
for sure.
Nice.
For sure.
A little bit of praise. Did your pay go up with season 4? Because the music went to another level.
We had a set increase every year that was well below inflation. That we got a raise each time. So yes, technically yes, I did.
Technically yes.
Well, and I spared the multiple questions because I like when I posted it to the patrons, I was like, okay, who's going to be first to ask the question? When are the soundtracks coming out? And of course, somebody already said that's been answered many times. And of course, Ty took my question. I wanted to know about the Neil, which was great. But I wanted to kind of also know what do you prefer, TV or movie?
Well, movies I get more time, so I like that to write it. But with TV, I get more time to evolve themes and grow with characters. So they're both kind of equal to me, as long as they're both done at the same quality level. They just offer different things. I mean, obviously, there's a financial benefit to TV in that it's a paycheck more regularly. But, if purely from creative standpoint, they're equal to me, just different.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Thanks.
And I'm glad we could finally get our schedules to line up, because we've been trying to land CLiton for, I don't know, what is it, months now, years?
I don't know. A while. It's been a while. I don't know if the emails were going into my spam, but yeah.
Well, and for a while there, we just couldn't get the schedules to line up. But I'm glad we finally did, and thank you to Naren for coming on in place of Wes. You're like a much less attractive Wes.
Oh, I know.
Yeah,
believe me, I know.
We all are. Yeah.
My wife tells me that all the time.
Yeah.
Oh, yours too.
Yeah, mine too.
Yeah, I think a lot of wives are telling their husbands that now.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks guys for coming to hang out, and thank you to everybody who listened. Joseph will put on the thing that says to like and subscribe and all that bullshit. And I think we're going to wrap it up. So say goodbye, Naren.
Goodbye, Naren.
See you later. Thanks for having me on.
China girl.